Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Gene Secchi, and joining me today is Mildra the Monk. Hello.
Hello there. Thank you for having me. I enjoy being had.
Excellent. So, Mildra, what kind of content do you like to make?
So, I style myself as a variety VTuber,
Hmm.
um, one that does have a bit of an emphasis towards covering tabletop RPGs and covering indie content as a whole. Um, but even with that, I'm not opposed to venturing outside of that. I know pretty soon I'm going to venture outside of that, talking about sports.
Hmm.
Although not in a serious analytical kind of way, but more of a doing it for the laughs kind of way.
Hmm.
It's all about for me. It's all about showing what's out there and having a good time while doing it.
Nice.
A chaotically good time, but a good time nonetheless.
Hey, if it's not getting a little crazy, are you really doing it right? But
There's some stories I could tell about the Rapungi incident, but I'm told not to tell those stories.
what made you want to be a VTuber?
Well, strap in because this is a bit of a story.
Hmm.
Um, if I had more of a beard, I would say stay a while and listen. Yeah, that's a really bad impression. But so I have been doing content in one form or another on YouTube and more recently on Twitch for a total of 10 years.
Wow.
I'm well aware that I'm in the minority when it comes to that kind of tenure. A lot of people start and end their channels in only a few years.
Hmm.
But but when I started, VTubing was barely a thing.
Yeah.
And as I developed the stuff that I was doing, first starting with just doing reviews of RPGs and then expanding outward from there as I started to get more and more comfortable and started to get more and more ambitious in my own skin.
Hmm.
And when the VTubing thing came about, initially I thought that my particular style, as somebody who focuses on TTRPGs outside of the big ones like D&D or Pathfinder or the like, that there wouldn't really be a place for me there, especially since when I'm not doing that, I'm likely covering indie games or covering things outside of the norm.
Hmm.
And it was through the encouragement of some of my colleagues on the show, especially people like Brother John and another VTuber, Theodore Locus, who helped me, as well as Adventurer Ulm, who helped me see a different perspective on it. Um, and had more or less convinced me that one, there was an open spot because nobody was doing what I was doing, and two, I was already halfway to that point anyways, because I had gradually built up the Mildra name. It actually predates being a VTuber. I had built up the monk in a temple, running the open bar, the internet, all of that kind of stuff
Hmm.
for years. And I should note that my source of inspiration wasn't any other specific VTuber. I cite a lot of my inspiration to radio,
Hmm.
to like local radio shows in my neck of the woods.
Yes.
So my influences are a bunch of names that, unless you were in my home state, you would not know. And even if you were, you probably wouldn't know, because it's a lot of radio hosts in like sports and new and music and newscasting in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah. I do know that I had the interviewer who I met you through, Eric Loy, on the show recently, and he was a sports interviewer, and he mentioned that he thought of VTubers as being like the contemporary radio personality.
He definitely is on something with that.
Hmm.
And I would say that part of the reason I cite them in particular is that understanding of building a consistent character, which I very much was, even if I wasn't writing lore per se. I hadn't sat down and wrote out a page worth of lore or anything like that. It was just something that gradually built up into becoming canon through repeated use.
Hmm.
Uh,
So can you give for our audience's sake a brief description of that lore?
uh, I will note as a quick aside that instead of just writing lore, I plan on writing a full setting
Hmm.
because I haven't seen anybody else do that, and that's definitely within my wheelhouse. But I portray myself as a winter monk, a monk who has cultivated the chi of the winter of these seasons, especially winter,
Hmm.
and operates a temple in the snow-capped northern mountains. The temple is built on the side of those mountains, as opposed to being built on the foot of it.
Hmm.
Uh, and in doing so, it carries the air of the only thing that matters within its halls is the game in question or the subject matter in question. Everything else does not matter in that place. It is holy ground.
Hmm. So, what was the process for creating your character, would you say?
Um, I had tooled around with a few designs, especially when I needed a visual representation, which you see in some of my early videos. One of them looks very much like a monk. Then I had one that looked a little bit like something out of Castlevania. So I do love me some Metroidvania games.
Hmm.
And then I had made some inroads to getting the idea in my head, and I contacted a friend of mine, Jeremy Jack, the lead designer of Planetbound,
Hmm.
and I specifically contacted him when it came to developing a design concept because I did not want a design that was done by anyone who already had experience designing VTubers.
Hmm.
I wanted somebody who, if I gave them a concept, they wouldn't have any preconceptions.
Hmm.
And Jeremy's known me for a while. I covered his game Planet Bound in my Valley of the Judge deep dive series, and the original idea was to have a design that implemented elements of ice, of winter, and of trying to be this midway point between an Eastern and Western style monk,
Hmm.
but in a way that it didn't look like it was directly a Zen Buddhist or a Taoist priest or a Gregorian monk.
Yeah.
It was very much its own thing.
S-
And when I got that design, I sent it over to someone else to reinterpret it into a live 2D model, and the rest is history.
Hmm. So, what's your favorite accomplishment of your channel so far?
Um, I know some people might say doing something that got a bunch of numbers, but that's not really the thing that gives me the most satisfaction as a
Hmm.
performer. And at the end of the day, whether it be VTuber or not, I'm a performer first and foremost.
Yes.
And it's when I cover a given game, whether it be through a live stream, whether it be through an actual play or through a review, and that is enough to where somebody says to me that they bought a given game based on my recommendations,
Oh yeah.
and that has happened several times.
I'm not surprised.
And
That must be pretty good.
yeah, it when that happened the first time was several years ago. I had reviewed the revised edition of a TTRPG called Fading Suns, which is
Hmm.
currently owned by Ulysses Spiel. It's an interesting space opera,
Hmm.
one with a D20 system that I've called D20 Blackjack because you're trying to roll low, but also roll up to a certain threshold, just not go over it. Um, and I had spoken very highly about it. I didn't know a third edition would be coming out about a year later, but that's hindsight for you. But
Hmm.
somebody in the comments had stated that After watching my review, that was enough to convince them to go out and get the game themselves, and they did. And when that happened, I realized I have to start taking the way I treat reviews more seriously.
Hmm.
And I've in the process of that overhauled how I approach reviews. So it's not necessarily about how good or bad something is, but how easily I can recommend it to someone, and how many asterisks I have to put on that recommendation.
Okay, I see that. So, what do you think has been the biggest change to your channel since you've started VTubing?
Um, Mostly the look, because everything that I was doing beforehand, I'm still doing now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing that's changed is just having a new potential pool of contacts to work with. Since this kind of thing is all in service of one particular goal that I've had, and that is bridging the gap between different fan bases using tabletop as a intermediary, a way to bring people together. Uh,
So, what did you have like an example in mind of different fan bases?
I'll when it comes to my reviews, I will note I style myself like a tailor in terms of how I approach things, and I've seen people try and force D&D, for example, to lean more into anime and manga.
Hmm.
And with a lot of these series that they try and do that with, it is a case of trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Hmm.
A lot of cases are trying to do things with a system that is just not compatible with, when there are other systems out there that can handle that job much more easily and much more efficiently. And I try and show that's the case.
Hmm.
There's also the fact that I've been teaching people how to play tabletop since I was very young. I think since I was a teenager. And I've jokingly said that weebs are my best students because they don't have preconceptions.
Yeah. So, who is a VTuber you would love to talk to, and do you have anything that you would want to ask them?
Um, I haven't really thought too much about that because obviously I'd like to talk with as many different VTubers as I can muster.
Hmm.
Um, even more so if I can get them to try out new games that they may not have even considered.
Hmm.
Uh, as far But one of my ultimate goals at some point is to run a TTRPG campaign, or even just a one shot of with a bunch of different VTubers as players.
Hmm.
Uh, I know that's not as ambitious as what some would like to do, but
No, that's fine.
I don't see myself trying to headline Offkai or TwitchCon or anything like that, because those kind of conventions I have very little interest in.
Hmm.
My interest is in getting people together to have fun more than anything else.
Yeah. So, if you were having your ideal stream, who would you invite to it?
Um, my ideal stream would probably be inviting obviously some of the friends that I know of in in the space, but I would not be opposed to work to just working with just working with a bunch and taking a bunch of dumb questions when it comes to bringing people in. I can't really think of a specific person I'd want to work with.
Hmm. So, what drew you to doing interviews?
Um, so in the early days of the channel, I hosted a live stream called Monastery Live in
Mm-hmm.
a different format. Originally, Monastery Live wasn't an interview series; it was a um, news based podcast. Covering news in a semi serious way, and one segment was the Kickstarter spotlight, where I'd showcase different Kickstarters that were crowdfunding at that time. And one of the projects I happened to showcase was um, Carbine Jungle by NorCal Mythos.
Hmm.
It was a bit of a meme lord in and of himself,
Yeah.
and I ended up getting a kick out of the insanity that was in that project, and I had half jokingly said I would love to have a conversation with the developer.
Hmm.
Little did I know that the developer was listening and messaged somebody on Facebook to try and get a hold of me.
Hmm.
So we did the arrangements. I set up the interview. I had a lot of fun interviewing him. We ended up going 2 hours,
Wow.
and then I had thought, oh, this was a lot of fun. Maybe I can do this with other people.
Hmm.
And then I started reaching out to other developers just to see what would happen. Some of them bit, some of them didn't. It was hard to get interviews early on because, well, I was a nobody in the grand scheme of things.
Of course.
But eventually, I started getting other people. Then it started spiraling. At the time you and I are having this conversation, I am about 12 away from doing 1,000 total interviews over the
Wow.
last 5 plus years.
Congratulations.
Mhm. And it's just been a lot of fun to give people a space to talk about the thing that they're already passionate about
Hmm.
with somebody who understands that, since I don't script my interviews at all.
Of course. So, what was the first anime you ever watched, and what drew you to it?
um, the first anime that I watched is probably one that I shouldn't have at my age, and that was Crying Freeman.
I'm not familiar with that one. Uh, what was
Crying
it about? Oh, sorry.
Crying Freeman was a crime fiction series with some very adult implications. It was a product of the OVA boom um, of the late '80s and early '90s,
Hmm.
especially with the VHS trading, which is how I got a hold of that.
Wow.
And I don't remember what it was about it that stuck me, but something, maybe it was this whole new frontier that I was being exposed to when it came to what could be done with animation. But I wanted to dig further into it, and I ended up discovering other series. Um, it certainly helped that there was a Suncoast near where I lived when Suncoast was still around, so I was buying VHSs there when I started making my own money.
Hmm.
One of the first I can say one of the first series, in fact, the first anime that I physically bought with my own money was the first volume on VHS of Orphan,
Hmm.
of Sorcerer Stabber Orphan. Um, this is the '90s version that was animated by AIC, not the obviously not the more recent one that was animated by Studio Dean.
Yeah.
Uh, and that led me down further rabbit holes. And going down rabbit holes is a recurring thing that you'll end up seeing if you look through my history of discovering something, wanting to learn more, learning more, and leads me to more discoveries that I want to learn more about, and the cycle repeats.
Cool. If you could go to an anime convention tomorrow, whom would you cosplay as?
Um, Obviously, I can't cosplay as myself, but given my height and the way I carry myself, my friends have tried to bully me into cosplaying as Seto Kaiba for years.
Hmm.
Um, Especially since there's the running meme of me really liking long coats.
Hmm.
Uh,
So, which game did you have? Have you ever done? You've done some game streams, right?
oh yeah, I've done a lot of them, and I'm currently trying to get through as much of Final Fantasy 16 as I can within the next week.
And which game did you have the most fun playing on stream?
Um, I have varying degrees of fun with every game I play, especially since some streams are me just grabbing a bunch of demos off of Steam or off of various itch.io pages and just going through each one of them in a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Uh, and for me, one of the early bits of that kind of fun was going through a twin stick shooter called Ruiner.
Oh yes, I've heard of that one.
Hmm. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, midway through the stream, somebody comments, "I just bought Ruiner after watching you play it." Uh, but if one were to go back and look at the video game streams that I've done, a recurring thing that they would see is a lot of the obvious stuff is not there.
Hmm.
You're not going to see me stream Fortnite. You're not going to see me stream Lethal Company. You're not going to see me stream League or anything like that. You're going to see me streaming indie games and RPGs and the like
Hmm.
things things that I have a bit more attachment to as opposed to I'm not going to say riding a trend that sounds not right, but I'm not going to be doing the stuff that everyone else is doing. My my mantra of showing what's out there is something that is reflected in the majority of things I do.
Hmm. So you would say that if I was to say what do you look for in a video game? What do you think you would say to that?
Um, it's never one thing. The best way I can describe it is that a game that I would be interested in streaming has a certain it factor, either in its presentation, in the staff, in the gameplay. But there's some kind of factor that draws attention to the point where I'd want to showcase it.
Hmm.
Um, Popularity of a given game is not one of those factors. I will note
Yeah.
because a lot of times when I rattle off some of the games that I've streamed, I often hear from people I've never heard of any of those games, and part of me wants to go, well, keep your eyes open. You've got two, as my mentor would say, you've got two eyes and one mouth for a reason.
Hmm. Uh, what games are you looking forward to?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
The long answer. Why not?
There's quite a few games, especially since later this month, Steam Next Fest is around the corner. But
Hmm.
to give a few potential ones, um, I'm very much looking forward to Mecha Break. I played through the alpha. I didn't get access to the closed beta. That was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Um, I'm there's quite a few games in there's quite a few games in what's known as the Hangover shit show streams that I've covered that am certainly going to be looking forward to.
Hmm.
Uh, Windbound is already in early access, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. There's also stuff like Steel Hunters, which is doing the BR concept but with mechs. Uh, there Obviously stuff like Onimusha Way of the Sword. That's something I'm going to be interested in when that comes around.
Hmm.
Um, Stuff like Turok Origins because I want to see what Saber Interactive is going to do with Turok after what they've done with Space Marine 2.
Yep.
Um, Mafia: The Old Country, which feels like Mafia 4 in all but name. Um, Tears of Metal, which can best be described as a roguelike Scottish Dynasty Warriors. uh, I know there's also stuff like Ninja Gaiden Ragebound.
Yep.
I know that there's been a bunch of Ninja Gaiden stuff that's been announced in the last few weeks, but Ragebound I specifically want to highlight since it's essentially doing Ninja Gaiden by way of the team that did Blasphemous.
Hmm.
Um, this recently launched a demo, but also Hover Grease 2, which is something I'm keeping an eye out on because I'm a big fan of twin stick shooting,
Okay.
and Hover Grease is something that was around, then it got shut down, then it came back, and now it's coming out of the limbo that it was in. There's also stuff like Expedition 33 Claire Obscure, which anybody who's got an inkling towards turn-based combat should definitely be giving that a look.
Hmm.
Uh, there, I'll probably end up taking a look at Shadow Labyrinth, if nothing but the sheer absurdity of doing Pac-Man in a Metroidvania, which I realize how that sounds, but that's exactly what it is. Um,
I mean, it makes sense. You got corridors and things that will kill you, and you
mhm.
just put pellets in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a project called Covenant, which is going to be very interesting, and some projects that are currently in early access that I'm keeping an eye out on. There's also the fact that the Shadow of the Colossus frontman Fumiko Ueda is working on a new unnamed project.
Hmm.
So I know I just rattled off a bunch of different names, but the point is that there's a lot of stuff I'm keeping an eye out on that is showcasing that there's far too much good being made out in the gaming space for me to have any bit of cynicism that some pundits have regarding the state of gaming. Yes, I know that the AAA end of things is in a sorry state. I'm not breaking new ground by saying that.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I have been seeing so many high quality indies and just high quality passionate work within indies and double A that I have a hard time being cynical.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it's
I've
always. Oh, sorry.
I've seen some people say, the Western gaming scene is dying, except for the occasional indie."
Hmm.
The last Hangover shit show had about 40 different games we showcased. It's no longer occasional.
Hey, I mean, all it means is that if the AAA fails, then somebody small goes in and makes a good game, and everybody buys it.
Yeah, and I have a bit of proof when it comes to that, but because unlike certain pundits, I study my history. When TSR, the original owners of D&D, went belly up in the 90s due to a lot of really, really, really stupid decisions that I don't have time to dive into, um, I'll suffice to say that they were paying their lawyers more money than their game designers. Uh, that didn't kill off TTRPGs. That didn't kill off tabletop role playing games with it completely.
Hmm.
What ended up happening is things diversified. You had companies like White Wolf and others step into the vacuum in the mid to late 90s.
Hmm.
Uh, when when things like even with the sorry state of say the big two when it comes to their comic books, there's still people making comic books. There's a lot of people making very good indie comics,
Hmm.
and with the recent OGL fiasco that happened 2 years ago, where Hasbro decided that they were going to screw with an open gaming license that had been in place since 2000. All that happened with that was a lot of people said, "Screw you! I'm making my own stuff,"
Hmm.
and that's exactly what happened. And I said in a roundabout way, um, that particular decision Hasbro made may be a net positive for the entire RPG scene because it means a lot of people are venturing out into other territories.
Hmm. So, your friends just dropped in to play video games. What are you
Mm-hmm.
playing?
Um, so it depends on whether or not I feel like torturing them. I can always break out certain party games. Fighting games are gonna get played, and pardon my French, but shit talking is inevitable.
Of course.
Uh, like I am I am a very vocal advocate for trash talking because Lord knows I did that all the time.
Of course.
fact, I would pull a Larry Bird a few times where I would tell someone exactly who I was going to pick for the next match and that they couldn't beat me, and then I would do exactly that.
You're
Uh,
calling your shot.
mhm. Or there'd be times where I would goad somebody into taking a gentleman's bet, not for money or anything like that, but loser has to go through some kind of punishment. Uh, one of them was, okay, if you lose this, whoever loses this set has to drink a bottle of bacon soda.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's exactly as bad as you think it is. Um,
To be very brutal with you, I like bacon, but I don't understand the cult of personality around bacon.
mhm.
Eh.
Yeah, so party games, fighting games. Sometimes it's not uncommon for me to just open up an RPG and it's a case of one person playing and everybody's doing commentary, um, which is an energy I'd like to bring into future streams if I'm able to.
Hmm.
But party games, racing games, certain certain casual shooters are also going to get played. I understand why Bungie had said that big team battle in Halo was meant to be a party game because that's kind of what it became.
Hmm.
Um, I recently convinced some of my friends to try out Road Redemption, which is a spiritual successor to Road Rash, just a little bit more unhinged.
Yeah.
Uh, so and there and there's been plenty of this. The point is that there's always an option, uh, because I just like games. Period.
Nice. Uh, and what advice would you give to someone who wants to interview others?
Um, just talk. Just don't treat it like a job interview. Treat it like you're two idiots in a pub.
Nice. So, this is the part of the interview where I like to ask more random questions. So,
Hmm.
leading off, which do you prefer, Elvis or the Beatles?
Um, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say Bob Dylan.
Okay.
Uh, that is mostly local bias, but um, if I had to pick somebody from that era, you would not see me pick the Elvis or the Beatles. You would see me pick Johnny Cash.
Okay. I like Johnny Cash.
Mhm.
Uh, so, you're on a boat with friends. What artist are you listening to?
Um, probably I'm probably listening to my folk metal playlist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because even on an island, I'm gonna be listening to the same kind of music that I usually listen to.
Hmm.
So guys like Ensiferum, guys like Heidevolk, guys like Twir. I may end up leaning into power metal as well with guys like Halloween or Luca Turilli
Mm-hmm.
or Jorn Lande. Um,
Cool.
Power metal and folk metal are my catnips, but I listen to a wide variety of music. One moment I might be doing that, another moment I might be doing BB King.
Oh.
Uh, another moment I might be listening to to the rap producers Snow Goons some, or even some local folk.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, there's a few genres I'm not as fond of. I'm not the biggest fan of like nightcore. Um,
Mm-hmm.
no bully to the people who like it, but it's just not my thing. But
Yeah.
I like discovering, so that leads me down a lot of different genres. I was When the Tokyo Olympics happened in 2020, one of the big takeaways I took was seeing somebody how I'd been a fan of for years being able to perform piano on stage. That being Hiromi Uehara,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who recently had her first debut when it came to anime, kind of, because she did the soundtrack for the film Blue Giant,
Okay.
which is a anime about jazz.
Hmm.
and she's a jazz fusion pianist who spent time studying at the Berklee College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she's done a few of experimental side bands over the years, uh, but but jazz fusion is an interesting beast because it's always, as the name kind of implies, there's always going to be variety with it.
Yeah. I should clarify. I actually live about an hour away from Berkeley, the Berkeley
Mm-hmm.
College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
I bought my
And
tuba from a Berkeley student.
uh, I did I briefly did flute at one point, then learned that I wasn't very good, and switched to drums. I have attempted to try and play the black page. I can't do it. Then again, most drummers can't do it. If you've seen the sheet music for Zappa's The Black Page, you know why most people can't, because that thing is evil.
I've never seen the sheet music, but I have heard of it.
Hmm. Well, what's evil about it is that it keeps constantly changing time signatures.
Yes. Uh, kind of like I, I recently heard King Crimson
Hmm.
had the album. Oh, what's it called? Oh, what's the name of that song? They
The Court of
mash.
the Crimson King.
No, they mash multiple chords together in the same song, and I can't remember the name of it. Oh, this is gonna bother me.
Yeah, you're probably going to find it out
It
after the show.
it was frame by frame, and they
Hmm.
have like every single player is on like a different time signature at the same time, and it
Yeah,
sounds pretty wild.
it sounds like it sounds like something that World's Worst Orchestra would come up with,
Hmm.
which is just an act where they have a proper orchestra just playing everybody else's instrument
Hmm.
and told to wing it. So you end up with things that sound just close enough to what it's supposed to sound like, but it still sounds very wrong.
Hmm. So, what's a good movie to watch on a Sunday afternoon?
There's quite a few. Um, I recently finished watching The Gentleman, which was a British crime fiction film that was made in like 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that one that was pretty good. But if I have to pick something to watch on that kind of Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, I can always go with the Blues Brothers, which
Nice.
is one of my favorite movies. I have referenced it plenty of times. When it comes to the mission that I have as a VTuber, more than once I have said we are on a mission from God.
uh, Dan Aykroyd knew how to deliver a line.
Mm-hmm. Uh, and I do find it funny that that whole thing started just because Aykroyd and Belushi absolutely hated disco, which, given how ubiquitous disco was at that time, I don't blame them.
I always felt that disco got kind of a bad rap. There are some disco songs that I like. I can see if it was literally everywhere all the time, I would probably get sick of it too.
It
But
was.
yeah. uh, so, would you ever talk to a stranger unprompted in a public setting?
Yeah, it's called talking to people at conventions.
Yeah. There you
But
go.
I've talked to people I have a bit of introversion, but I'm not that level of introverted.
Mm-hmm.
So I have gradually developed the ability to get into to strike up a conversation with anyone. Sports is a very good icebreaker, I will admit.
Hmm.
Um, I usually don't get involved in like news discussions because it's the whole don't talk about politics or religion at the table
Yeah,
kind of thing.
of course.
But talking with a random person, that's like 60% of my job, anyways.
uh, so, which do you prefer, chess or poker?
um, I'm gonna cheat and say backgammon.
Okay, backgammon's pretty fun.
I like backgammon. There's been plenty of times of salt harvesting. 'Cause my love for games extends not to just video games or TTRPGs, but board games as well.
Hmm.
Even though some board games I think should be considered forms of torture. Looking at you, Jenga.
I've maintained that the ultimate form of torture in a board game is Monopoly.
Monopoly is just a Viking death march. Jenga is disassembling a bomb.
Hmm. So, which do you prefer, home cooked meal or restaurant?
I can go either way, but if I'm going to a restaurant, I am going to a local spot.
Hmm.
That is on the higher priority. I'm not going to a chain place unless it's a chain place that's technically local. Like I'll give a local example just for me because in order to kind of illustrate what I mean. There is a pizza and hoagies place in my neck of the woods known as Devani's. They
Mm-hmm.
have been around. They have multiple locations across the area, and they have been around since 1970.
Wow.
But they do not go outside of the state.
Hmm.
Uh, there's also a Italian place that's within walking distance to my house that I'll frequently visit for lunch breaks and the like,
Hmm.
or if I just need an excuse to get out of the office.
So, what's your favorite thing you've ever cooked yourself?
Um, it was the time that my I I had a bit of an advantage to some when it comes to learning to cook because my father was a restaurant chef for a good amount of years, and he taught me a lot of what he knew.
Hmm.
That results in me knowing how to cook. I'm no stranger to cooking. I'm just not going to make things pretty.
Yeah.
It's going to be good, but I'm not going to be doing some artisan stuff.
Yeah.
And learning the different types of pastas that he taught me. Some of them he insisted on being world famous. The jury's out on that, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
And in particular, are you familiar with a Greek thing known as mosca?
No. Do you have? Is there an American name for it?
Um,
Sorry, an English name for it, I should say.
yeah, not really. The best way I can describe it is think of something like a lasagna, but instead of using noodles, it's using eggplant.
Yeah, I've had something like that. Well, here I would have called it eggplant lasagna, or vegetable lasagna sometimes.
Yeah, it's not a vegan thing. You're still getting meat, but instead of noodles, it's just using eggplant. Because you talk about things getting a bad rap. I think eggplant is one of the more disrespected things that you can put into food,
Hmm.
or just have it grilled.
Yeah.
And grilled eggplant is great.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I've never had an issue with eggplant myself.
Yeah, I don't either, but a lot of people really really hate it. Uh, the only the only food that's that high on the hate-o-meter is stuff like blue cheese, where just the smell of it is enough to get me in a bad mood.
That's a shame because I love blue cheese.
Hmm.
I'll tell you what, I'll eat your blue cheese.
Yeah, of course. The other thing is chocolate, but I have a good reason for that. I'm allergic to chocolate.
You are not the first person I've met who was allergic to chocolate.
Yeah, it's the cocoa bean specifically, and there was the infamous incident of somebody leaving a chocolate cake on my desk that started what would have been a war crime in a office setting
Hmm.
because in retaliation I messed with the coffee.
Oh dear.
Everybody knew I had a chocolate allergy, so leaving a chocolate cake on my desk on my birthday
Ooh.
you may as well have just walked right up to my doorstep, drop pants, and took a dump right on my front door.
Do you remember the movie Matilda, the one based off the
Yeah.
Roald Dahl book?
Hmm.
I think of the chocolate cake from that movie. That chocolate cake from that movie, it like it haunts my dreams.
Uh,
I know you don't like chocolate, but I still really want to know what that chocolate cake tastes like.
hmm uh, of course, if I want to have an easy way to mess with somebody, I can always just um, sw- swap their regular Hershey bar with a bar of unsweetened chocolate.
Ooh, baker's chocolate. Ooh,
Yeah, I did that
ugh,
once using dark baker's chocolate,
ugh, yuck.
and the I could hear the spit take from across the room.
uh,
It's something about me, and I've mentioned this a few times. I am the absolute worst when it comes to pranks.
mm-hmm.
Like most people, when they do pranks, they'll do the hand in warm water, or they'll do the shaving cream, or maybe crank call somebody. I go one step further. Um, like in order to, I will do things like rig the kitchen floor with 4 pounds of D4s, four sided dice.
Yep.
They look like we call them caltrops in the trade.
Yeah.
So imagine stepping on that barefoot.
It's like a Lego on acid.
Yeah.
Uh, do you have a favorite prank of yours?
There's been a few. There's the coffee thing I mentioned before. There's the time I almost caused a health scare in high school,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I put up flyers warning about dihydrogen monoxide.
Yep.
It's not even
Classic.
it's not even my joke. It's been a thing for decades.
I
Uh,
I remember seeing them do a bit on that from a Penn and Teller show.
uh, and I've d- I've done. There's been things like that. Actually, one of my fondest ones. This wasn't technically a prank, but it was treated as such. Is a case of be very careful what you wish for.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of my dear friends who is not all that online uh, comes to me and says, "I could you make me a louder alarm clock because I keep sleeping through my alarm clock."
Oh dear.
And I had asked him, "Okay, is there any specifics you want me to do? Any sound triggers I should be aware of?" He said, "I don't give a fuck. Just make it loud."
Oh, I can
Okay,
do that.
okay. So, did you ever play the old Sonic games on the Genesis/Mega Drive?
No. I
Uh,
do know about Sonic. I've seen it played, and I even played it back when there was a browser version of it, but I did not play it
but
on the Sega.
but you're familiar with the OG games, right?
Yes.
So you remember that jingle that plays if you're underwater for too long without an air bubble?
Uh, no, I'm not familiar with
It's
that.
this loud counting down from 5 to 1.
Ooh.
Um, it is infamous for living rent free in Sonic fans' heads. That was his alarm clock at full blast. And the day afterwards, he's yelling at me about how I could have given him a heart attack, and I just told him, "You told me to make you a louder alarm clock. I did exactly what you asked."
uh, Speaking as an engineer, you sound like an engineer.
I'm not, but I have friends who are, and I've had people at my gaming table who are, and I keep in the latter case, I keep them on a very short leash because I know what they're capable of.
uh, okay, so what have you ever had a silly accident that makes you laugh in retrospect?
Um, I've had I have had one incident that it wasn't funny at the time, and it wasn't technically my fault, but it was something that I laugh about in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my fair share of stage acting.
Yep.
once upon a time. Um, and usually getting typecast in big guy roles because even back then I was taller than everybody. I'm 6'6" these days.
Oh wow.
6'6" or 198 centimeters for those who want to use um, lesser
The
measurements.
the wrong units.
Yeah, the wrong units. It's a free country. You're free to be wrong. And sometimes that would involve me having to play a corpse. And if you play a corpse on stage during rehearsal, everybody's going to try and make you crack.
Yeah.
Usually it would end up with me sitting up like I'm the Undertaker, and then everybody ends up running because they thought I was gonna kill him. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. I can only do that once. Uh, now putting you through stretching practice, that's another story.
Hmm.
But for one particular play that we had rehearsed for about 4 months,
Mm-hmm.
this was a chamber play, and I was going to be acting opposite of one person for long stretches of time.
Hmm.
And right before curtains are about to go up and we're getting ready to go, he tells me I forgot all my lines.
Oh dear.
I am trying to maintain a cool composure, but inside my head, I am screaming bloody murder, and I'm like, "All right, just follow my lead, do what I need to do." And I went through that whole play, feeding him his lines while not making it look like I was feeding him his lines. It helped that we had to be close to each other during the whole thing because again chamber play, so I could whisper certain things or gesture certain things, and I was already very animated, so I was able to somewhat get away with it.
Yeah.
He should be very thankful that I took the time to memorize everyone else's lines so I knew my cues.
Yeah.
And when we were done, we got a standing ovation. And when we finally got to the back, I said, I'm going to need this room over here for about 5 minutes. And I didn't punch him. I didn't kick him or anything like that. I just put him in various holds. Uh, I put him in a chicken wing, which is wrenching the arm back.
Mm-hmm.
Just, while he's yelling for me to let go. I'm like, I should be kicking your ass for what you put me throughout that. I thought I was gonna fucking die.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
eventually I let him go and let him out there, and everybody's like, "What happened?" Was like disciplinary actions.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I did some of the theater stuff too, and I remember, people would. No one ever forgot the whole play, thank God. But usually it would just be like someone forgot what they were doing on stage, and someone would ad lib. Oh, what are you? Do you have this over here? And
Yeah,
and just
I'm pretty sure if I had beat the hell out of him in that room, nobody would have blamed me.
yeah. Not me. I feel bad because he probably, he probably knew his lines and then just had like a freak accident of some sort. Because that has happened to me where I forgot a lot of information overnight.
Hmm.
And it was very, very bizarre because it was before a what was it? It was a math test, and I
Hmm.
forgot the entire curriculum. And this was in my sophomore year of college, and I forgot the entire curriculum like one night before a test. So I had to do my best to learn everything in the following 3 hours.
Uh, Whenever I did tests, there was always somebody who tried to ask for one of the answers. I would intentionally give them answers I knew were wrong.
Yeah. Eventually, people will stop.
Yeah, um, I if, whether it be in high school or college, I was an absolute nightmare for some folk.
Hmm.
Um, because our mascot was the Trojans. As a bit of fun, I had some of the woodworking people make me a hollowed out wooden horse that was full of Trojans.
Oh, yep. There you go.
Uh, there for one of my English assignments, I had to write a report, but my professor, in his infinite wisdom, set April 1st for the due date.
Oh
I
dear.
sent him the report. It was a legit report. It's just that the whole thing was in mirror writing. This was 20 pages long, double sided.
Hmm.
And you've got to hold the thing up to a mirror. And he called me out in front of everybody, asking why I did it. And without missing a beat, I told him, "Why'd you set April 1st for the due date?"
Oh boy. What
But
do you remember what you got for a grade?
I got an A with
Oh.
a side note saying, "Never do this again." And he attached a dozen photos that he had taken of himself holding up a hand mirror that he probably got from his wife or his significant other. I didn't ask, and just staring daggers in the camera, like 12 different photos. I'm just, and I was just. I think he realized that I had outwitted him, but he didn't want to admit it.
If
And
you're capable of outwitting the teacher, I think that deserves an instant A right there. But that's just me.
yeah, for the longest time, he had an attitude of towards me of, "You're not wrong. You're just a dick."
Okay, what would your ideal vacation look like?
Um, probably doing a bunch of. I know a lot of weebs would say they'd like to go to um
Japan.
say Tokyo. They'd like to go to Japan, but they'd like to go to Tokyo. Probably go to Akihabara or something.
Yeah.
My ideal thing is if I'm going to Japan, I'm going there for two things. Well, three things, and two of them are in Tokyo. None of them are weave things. One of them is going to a wrestling show in the Tokyo Dome,
Mm-hmm.
and going to either the Tokyo Dome or Korakuen Hall.
Hmm.
Uh, because I love me some Puerto S. Every year I'll watch Wrestle Kingdom as it's happening, which I don't recommend to anyone with unless they have a certain constitution. Because the last one, which was last month, that show started at 1 a.m. my time, and I didn't go to bed until 6 a.m.
Hmm.
And then I had to go, and then I had to do it then I had to do it again the next day for the New Year Dash follow up show.
Hmm.
But ideally, I'd like to go. Ideally, if I'm not going with that, I'd like to visit Iceland.
Hmm. Is there anything in Iceland that you're looking for?
Um, I very much enjoy my fair share of the great outdoors, especially given where I am, where the fishing opener every year is almost like a state holiday, and go be because I'm in the Midwest,
Yeah.
specifically in the land of 10,000 lakes.
Ah.
um,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of outdoorsy stuff that goes on all the time. I've
Yes.
bet went many of the lakes involved. I have been to plenty of them, including the big ones like Lake Superior, which looks like a flat ocean when you're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and a place like Iceland, which has a very unique kind of biome,
Yes.
is something that I would like to explore. There's a reason why it's called the land of fire and ice, because you obviously have the cold parts of it, but you also have the more active bits of lava in that area.
Hmm. I do remember. I have been out to the Midwest before.
Hmm.
I went to Michigan to visit a friend, and all I can remember is it's very flat.
Um,
It's
yeah, Michigan is definitely flat. Minnesota a little bit less so, because you've got to deal with all of the lakes. But the big thing that I always warn people about is there are not four seasons. There are
hmm.
only two seasons: winter and not winter.
I've heard people say that before.
That and Mother Nature is on drugs. I mean, it can go from the negatives to like 30 degrees over the course of 24 hours.
Oh yeah, I'm from New Hampshire. We have the same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, the wild temperature fluctuations here.
I've had the running joke that Mother Nature is on drugs
Mm.
because she's hanging out with Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh yeah. Hey, wait a second. You're not in Nevada. Uh, so you find $20 in the street. What do you buy with it?
um, Probably more books. Probably go to a half price books and just raid that spot because a bit of a side thing. I calling me a massive bookworm is an understatement.
Hmm.
I am that person who would go into a library or a bookstore when they open and I don't leave until they close.
Yeah.
I ended up reading the entirety of the library at one place that I lived in over the course of a summer,
Hmm.
just being in and out every single day. Uh, and because of that, I not just with RPG books, but just books in general. I keep a lot of books in my collection.
Hmm.
A lot of them are out of print, but I don't plan on auctioning them off anytime soon because I still like reading them,
Yeah.
and I never got the appeal of putting something to be read in a sealed container for value or something like that. I find that kind of collecting cringeworthy, and obviously I have to be a bookworm to do not only what I do, but also the fact that I'm in the midst of developing my own TTRPG. So
Hmm.
that so research is something that I've always advocated for.
Yeah. So, which is your favorite holiday and why?
Um, Obviously, Halloween's off the list for very good reasons. I mean, I like the holiday, but because of all the chocolate and shit, stuff like Halloween and St. Valentine's Day are off the list.
Oh yeah.
Um, I do I couldn't narrow it down to one, but the holidays that I am far more fond of are things like St. Patrick's Day.
Hmm.
Um, Even if it involves doing the annual tradition of me getting kicked out of a worst Irish tenor contest at a local pub again, a proud tradition going back 3 generations. Uh, obvi- Obviously, because of where I am, I'm no stranger to Oktoberfest, and one would I know some might say these are a lot of party kind of holidays.
Yeah.
That is true because I certainly enjoy having a good time. The drinks are optional, but um, if I had to if I had to nail it down to one, it probably would be St. Patrick's Day. Uh,
Hmm. Incidentally, I should note that where I'm from, they tried to have an Oktoberfest once. It was the most disappointing event I had ever been to in my life. They had nothing. The only thing they had that was German themed at all was they had some buggies. They had some Volkswagens there. And that was it. They had beer, which was Sam Adams. And the food they had was just a couple of food trucks with nothing German themed.
really, no schnitzel.
No schnitzel, and there were stalls there. None of them were German themed. It was basically just a craft fair. If you've ever been to a craft fair, it was
Yeah,
basically just
I've
that.
been to those.
Yeah, it was very very disappointing. Uh,
Yeah,
so,
and like I think I think if I'm being honest, the market for doing something like Oktoberfest is at least in the U.S. is going to be cornered by the Midwest
hmm,
because that's where
because
that's
that's
where
where most of the Germans are.
most of the Germans and Scandinavians. There are legit German restaurants in my area.
Hmm.
But the fact that they didn't have any schnitzel and They probably had sausages, but they probably were standard sausages. No no niren, no veal,
Mm-hmm.
no no strudel, none of that. Just absolute shameful.
Yes. So, if you could wake up with one talent tomorrow, what would it be?
Um, I would say I would say the ability to just to learn more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If only because that's going to make a lot of jobs a lot more easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, quite literally have a photographic memory.
Hmm.
Uh,
I mean, there is something to be said for learning slowly because if you learn quickly, you can also forget quickly from my
yeah, but
experience.
having some degree of perfect memory is what I'd want to wake up with.
Hmm. If you could talk to a historical figure, who would it be?
Um, I know some people would probably point out the obvious ones. Um, this may sound a bit unorthodox, but I would like to try and see if I could survive one day drinking with Winston Churchill. I will probably fail that miserably if you've seen what his drinking habit was. But
Not only would you fail, but he would ridicule you afterwards, and it would become a quote that people said for the next 1,000 years.
yes, if not him, then then Jefferson,
Mm-hmm.
just because I would like to be a fly on the wall when it came to him going over how much he absolutely hated pirates. That was why he refounded the Navy, was because he and even when he was vice president, he ran against his president in the next election, and "fuck the pirates" was essentially his campaign slogan. But I'd also I was gonna say John Heisman, but I feel like if I spent more than 5 seconds with him, he would just stare into my soul.
uh, so, what's a TV show you felt deserved another season?
Um, well, not you probably hear it a lot, but an obvious answer is something like Firefly.
Yep.
Mostly because of the fact that it just got completely screwed over.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say there's a part in, a big one that comes to mind for me was that first attempt at a live action Flash,
Hmm.
because that's one that everybody involved with that was really trying their best. Um, and you can kind of see the inklings of what would become Hamill's Joker in his portrayal of the Trickster in that series.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the big ones that comes to mind.
Yeah. Okay. And do you collect anything?
Uh, aside from books, I do collect music. I've never done any sort of collecting for its own sake, like just trading cards, unless I can use them for an actual game.
Yep.
I do try and collect out of print RPGs.
Yeah.
A recent edition was the first attempt at doing Dune in TTRPG, which is Chronicles of the Imperium.
Hmm.
The reason that's a rare one is because the print copies that came out were a limited edition version, and then there was going to be a standard edition. But the company that made it, Last Unicorn Games, folded before that regular edition could come out.
Mm-hmm.
They got bought by Wizards of the Coast with the idea of doing Dune D20. That never happened. So those copies were the only. So those handful of copies were the only ones that actually got made.
Hmm. I bet you Dune would make a killer anime.
I think it could be done, but it all comes down to having the right studio.
Hmm.
Like certain studios are going to be better at certain types of anime.
Hmm.
Uh, like a big reason why season two of One Punch Man didn't quite stick the landing was because
They
instead
chose.
of Madhouse, it was JC Staff.
Yeah.
JC Staff has a bit more of a track record when it comes to slice of life type anime.
Yeah.
So they had no business doing a very Sakuga heavy shonen battle manga.
I don't think I've ever seen Madhouse do something that I didn't specifically like.
Yeah, Madhouse had I would say they were one of the few anime studios in the 2000s that actually grasped digipaint easier than others did.
Hmm.
Because the 2000s, when it comes to anime, was a awkward period on the production end of things,
Hmm.
since a lot of studios were jumping onto digital animation through the digipaint model,
Mm-hmm.
and and that was you're having a lot of people jump from the hand drawn approach that they had been doing to using digital techniques,
Hmm.
and most people were able to adapt eventually, but there were some awkward years.
Yes.
And you really don't see that level of awkwardness until you try and put some of those works in HD, and you see a lot of the shortcuts and mistakes made.
Yeah.
Uh, this is the reason. Are you familiar with Sakuga?
No.
Sakuga is a term to refer to that particular scene where the animation gets much more detailed. I.e., that's where the bulk of the animation budget went.
Yes.
Uh,
I know exactly the phenomena you're describing.
mhm. Yeah,
It,
that is
that
the term for it.
this is the scene. The entire season has been basically building up to this. uh,
Yeah, Sakuga. It does mean draw. It means drawing pictures, but it's when things start getting fluid.
yeah. Um, and my final question of the evening: what smell reminds you of home?
That's a tricky one because I've had many homes over the years,
Hmm.
but anytime I smell cooking, I consider myself home.
Hmm. Nice. Well, that's all I have for the interview. Thank you very much for coming out, Mildra. I do appreciate it. Uh,
Mhm.
and if you in the audience are watching, be sure to check out the links in the description to Mildra's various socials. Thank you again for coming out. Uh, and I've been your host, Jack Gene Secchi, and joining me today was Mildra the Monk. Goodbye, everybody.
Stay frosty.